As we proceed from our coffee break, we are going straight into our next presentation. I hope everybody's been scanned and entered, because we're now going to hear on exploring opportunities of subsea cables in the Caribbean from Ricardo Franco, sales consultant, global submarine for Sienna. Please welcome Ricardo Franco. More of a welcome. Welcome, Ricardo Franco.
First of all, globally, what we see in terms of subsea cables across the world. And then we're going to look back into the region, to the Caribbean region, and see how we compare and contrast with those trends, with that activity that we see globally, and also who is investing, who's building those cables these days, right? So what's going on there globally, and then we bring it back locally. So I'm Ricardo Franco. I've been connecting the world through oceans and clouds for 25 years now with Sienna, looking after the subsea business for the Americas. Happy to be here, first time at CANTO, so happy to be part of this community. Let me go next. It's a bit of an eye chart, a lot of information, but what you're going to see there, it's really all the cables that are announced today publicly. All of those, they already have reached contracting for status, meaning they have been contracted to be built. Money has changed hands. There's been a down payment to start building those. And we also keep track of, which is not super relevant for today, but we also keep track of who is building those as far as the construction companies, be that ASN, recently sold to the French government, Subcom, US company, NEC, based in Japan, HM Tech out of China, and Xterra here, US as well. So keep track of that. We also keep track of which of those cables are open cables, right? So that's one of the first trends that we immediately recognize there. If you look at the bullet, the second bullet, 60 open cables, which means more than 93% of those cables are open. When we say open cables, what we mean is that the wet plant has been deployed, constructed, and then at a second stage, the customers are going to contract the terminals to light those fiber pairs. Advantage of that is that you don't have to sign up for technology 3 years before these cables are built. It may take anywhere between two and a half or 3 years for these cables to get built, if everything goes well, which sometimes is not the case, as we know. But then you don't have to marry to a technology back then, so you can wait until the end to contract the SLT. That's what makes these cables open, and that's because a lot of advantages in terms of competition, latest technology, and all that. So if you do a flyby across the globe, starting here in the Americas, a lot of activity, of course, transatlantic. That's always been the case. We'll have a number of new cables being announced and going to be built. New hubs being established in the East Coast of the US. Myrtle Beach is an interesting one. That may end up becoming relevant for the Caribbean as well, because some cables are planned to touch the Caribbean and then go to Myrtle Beach. We'll talk about that next. As we move to Europe and Africa, what we see is a lot of activity around Africa continuing, right? So we had the cable from Google being finished a year ago. Now Meta is finalizing the To Africa cable, which is, a major build-out. It goes around the continent. And if you look at Africa, it's one of the continents that has the youngest population, so a lot of eyeballs, a lot of people looking at advertisement and clicking on things. So that's what the content providers, they look for. A lot of people, population, young, active, and also clicking at things, and they charge, of course, for advertisement space. That's how they make their money. If we keep going east, if you go across the Red Sea to connect to India and Southeast Asia, a lot of things are complicated now these days because of instability in the region. Many of those cables that are being built, they actually paused. The build-out has been paused now because of nobody can get there safely at the moment. So multiple cables, they are going to be delayed for a few years probably until they can be finalized. But still, it's a very important corridor to connect Asia to Europe. And that's one of the reasons why, if you look down, there's a cable called Umoja connecting South Africa directly to Australia. So new routes are being thought, they're being established to avoid going through the bottleneck that today is the Red Sea. If we keep moving east, we see a lot more of these regional cables connecting Southeast Asia, connecting Japan to Hong Kong, to Singapore. The reason we're seeing many of those regional cables is that due to the geopolitical situation between US and China relations has never been as, let's say, stranded as they are today, especially in the telecommunications. So no cables that are touching the US are touching China today. And Hong Kong used to be the major hub in the region. So because of that, new hubs are being established, and existing older hubs or more traditional hubs are being kind of brought back. So Japan is one of those. A lot of cables going to Japan now. Many cables going to Singapore. Also, Indonesia is becoming kind of a pass-through for those cables to go there. But everything is being driven globally, pretty much by geopolitical concerns, right? So new routes, new hubs, and investments. So activity, I mean, pretty active, a lot of things going on. If you look at the Pacific side, the Trans-Pacific, massive investment, and this is mostly being driven by Google. So Google is committed to build what looks like to be a global network, as it is. So they are now, today, the largest investor in subsea cables. So most of those cables that you see crossing the Pacific there, be it North Pacific or South, they're being sponsored and built by Google. What is different these days is that they're bringing more of the local communities to be part of those build-outs. They're trying to bring more connectivity, but also to bring more of, let's say, US or Western influence into the region, because that's so close to China. So a bit of combination there between connectivity and also economical influence that we're seeing. But one thing that we notice right off the bat is that what we call GCNs, right, the global content networks, the Googles, the Facebook, the Metas, the Amazons, all of those guys, they are really behind most of those cables. So every cable that has a little globe on its side is being sponsored by one of those content providers. So clearly, massively, they're investing on those subsea build-outs globally. We also see as some trends, we see more fiber pairs being built in every cable. Usually, traditionally, you will have 4, 6. 6 was kind of considered a high fiber count. 8 was, whoa, a lot of fiber pairs. Now 8 is almost the bare minimum, right? So we have 8, 12, 16, 20, 24. 24 being the largest fiber count that we see today. We have some of those cables crossing the Atlantic, 20 fiber pairs crossing the Pacific, and we're starting to see new technologies like multi-core fibers to allow for even more fiber pairs. So there's some trials going on the TPU cable that we'll see how it plays out, but seeking for new technologies. As we move back now to the Caribbean, right? So before we go to today, let's stroll back through memory lane a little bit. So these are the cables that were built between 2000 and 2013. So what we see is a massive build out. So a lot of cables were built in that time frame. And we see a lot of regional connectivity. You can notice that many of those cables, they're short hops between different countries, between different islands, between different territories in the region. If we fast forward a bit to 2014 to 2023, we see a little bit of a change. We see more of express connections, right? Going US, LATAM, going through the Caribbean. One good example is AMX1 by American Mobile. It's a US-Brazil connection, but it goes through different places in Central America as well. Other examples are PCCS that really cross over, going through Panama. Also, we have some cables that were intended to touch the Caribbean, like Seabrass 1, for example, end up never happening, but they do have branch units sitting there, could bring traffic there as well. So we see a bit of more express connections than very local connections. But if you look to today and into the future, looking at the recent cables that have been finalized in 2024 up to now, and looking ahead until 2027, we see some interesting things. So activity-wise, a lot of cables. So let me just illuminate those so we can see who they are. So multiple cables, different regions. They're not really driven by geopolitics or geopolitics in case of our region. It's more the need for connectivity and diversity. We're seeing probably some new hubs emerging. We're seeing more cables going across and landing in Panama, not just to cross it, but really to get traffic there. Colombia is becoming more and more important. Of course, South Florida is really the de facto hub of the Caribbean, right? So going to the NAP, going to Equinix, that's been the case for many years now. But we're seeing that some of those cables, they kind of touch Myrtle Beach again, so in South Carolina. So one of them is Fermina, which doesn't show going to the Caribbean, but they do have a braiding unit pointing to the region. I think to Dominican Republic is the closest one there. So we may see that being an alternative hub for the region to avoid the South Florida. We know hurricanes happening today in the region. This is going to be a very busy season, so there's always a risk of being some impact there. So if we have diversity, it will help us have survivability of our connectivity as well. But if you look at the cables particularly, so CSN1 going across from Ecuador all the way to Florida. We have also TEM1, which is an interesting cable. It's almost like two separate cables going east and west, connecting different countries, and the purpose is really open cables, carrier neutral, so it's different from the others. It's more on the carrier side almost, which we're seeing in this case. We don't see many of the content providers being involved in those regional build-outs. What we only see is two cables, transatlantic. They don't come to the Caribbean, so not super relevant, but they could be a way for traffic to go from Caribbean, Myrtle Beach in South Carolina, and then going across to Europe. But Fermina will eventually touch the Caribbean as well, also by a content provider, by a GCN. Other than those three, it's really either carriers or private builders. So we're seeing more of a local build-out, right, being sponsored and financed by the local carriers. Interesting one is Deep Blue 1, which was finalized earlier this year, connecting French Guiana, Suriname, Guyana, and Trinidad Tobago. Its, of course, main purpose is communications, but it goes across and very close to many interesting oil fields in the region. So we might see some additional revenue streams coming to this cable just because all those platforms, they need to be connected to the mainland, right? So they want to minimize how much they have in terms of people on the platforms because it's expensive, so they try to build all the traffic and have all the control in the mainland. So interesting mixed purpose there of a cable. We have AMX3 and Tikal, which is very specific connecting Guatemala to Florida. It used to be called the missing link because if you look at in the past, all the other connections from either SAM1 or SAC, they have been refreshed. But in this case, this link was still missing. And we have some cables that are not yet in force, but they're moving towards that, which will be Gold Data 1, Liberty Networks 1, so a joint effort by those two companies, Gold Data and Liberty Networks, to connect not only Mexico, but going down to Colombia as well. So interesting refresh of connectivity there. And one that doesn't touch the Caribbean, but could be interesting to extend traffic into the data centers into North America is Confluence 1, touching Florida and going up all the way to Wall, New Jersey, Virginia Beach, Myrtle Beach. So interesting regional cable that could be useful for some customers to get to those data centers. So in terms of trends, so do we see the same trends locally that we see globally? I would say yes, pretty much so. So all of these cables are open, right? All of these cables are being built with a wet plant, and the terminals, the SLTs, are being contracted and deployed at a later date. Many of those, they could be called SDM, which is space, the visual multiplexing, which basically means more fiber pairs on the cable. As the marine costs are a big bulk of the investment, so if you can cram more fiber pairs in a cable, it makes sense financially because you can also sell to more carriers, right? So we see some of those, they are SDM. TEM1 has either 20 or 24 fiber pairs. CSN1, I think, is about 10, so could be claimed it's SDM. Deep Blue, a mix of repeater and repeater. So they're all in that realm of additional fiber pairs, much more than the usual past 8 that we used to see. We're also seeing some spectrum offerings, right? So if you look at the Africa build-out, so many of those countries, they don't necessarily need a lot of capacity. So you can probably have a 20 terabit per second in terms of capacity in one of those fiber pairs, right? So if you don't need that much, maybe you take spectrum, maybe you take a 25% of spectrum, and that's enough for you, and you still can control your technology, your modems, your transponders. And in Africa, we're seeing some interesting examples that one customer would take a half, and then they'll take this half and split in three and sell a third to each one of those customers. So that might make sense for our region as well, because the need for capacity, it's less than the need for connectivity, right? So you have to be connected first, and capacity, of course, is a consequence of that. And also modems, we're seeing all these cables, they're trying to go and grab the latest technology that they have as quickly as they can. So in every generation, and Ciena does that a lot, modems, transponders, we are usually kind of ahead of the game, and in this case, we're going to be, again, pretty soon. So what we see is the demand for subsea connectivity comes first before than the terrestrial ones, because the need to have the maximum capacity or better spectral efficiency is much more critical in terms of subsea, just because it's so expensive to build those cables, tens of millions of dollars, sometimes hundreds of millions of dollars to build one of those cables. So having more capacity makes a lot of sense. So the same trends that we see outside, we see inside the region. So, and those trends are positive to create opportunities, be that taking spectrum, be that allowing yourself to control your destiny by having your own modems, your own technologies. And all of these cables, they're open. So this is good news because it's easier to go and choose your partners and collaborate as an industry and as a region. And as we heard before from previous presenters, so submarine networks and submarine cables, they are critical infrastructure. Right? So they're part of what we need to basically survive, right? If we cancel everybody's internet now, we're going to see many, many sad faces, right? And business will suffer. So it is critical. It is almost like a basic need today for us to survive. And these cables, as they are going to be built, they're going to be the basis of new applications, new services, could be advanced cloud services, could be AI, could be some next thing that we don't know yet. But in any case, they're going to be almost like the cornerstone of whatever comes next to improve connectivity, to advance communications, and be the basis of opportunities for the region now and into the future. So with that, thank you very much, and we'll be here for the whole day.
Thank you very much, Ricardo Franco, for that great presentation exploring the opportunities of subsea cables in the Caribbean. At this time, it gives me a lot of pleasure to say that one, Philip Henderson has arrived safely to Miami. He traveled from the Pacific, and he was not here yesterday for the panel discussion that we had that was led by Lisa Agard. And we really do want to get the commentary from the Pacific, so we are so grateful that Philip was able to make it. So can we give a rousing applause for Philip and Lisa will reintroduce the panel topic.
Good morning, all. As Rochelle said, Philip came all the way from the Cook Islands to Miami for this conference. And Philip is the chairman of PETA, which is the Pacific Islands Telecommunications Association, which is the Pacific Islands equivalent of CANTO. And he got stuck in Houston because of the storm. He only arrived yesterday afternoon, so I begged the organizers, we cannot have Philip come all the way from the Cook Islands and not say a few words to us and have a conversation about what's happening in the Pacific. So we first met Philip at Mobile World Congress in Barcelona earlier this year, and immediately we recognized that there were so many similarities between the Pacific Islands and the Caribbean, but there are differences as well. There are some islands with really tiny populations, sometimes no more than 500, 600 people, and they're spread over a larger geographic area, which makes their challenges for connectivity even more difficult. In addition, just like the Caribbean, they suffer from hurricanes. They suffer the effects of climate change in very stark ways. So, for example, the island of Tuvalu is literally disappearing because of rising sea levels. There's a famous video, I invite you to go on and look at YouTube, where the Prime Minister of Tuvalu is literally standing in the water where land used to be in Tuvalu. And he's even thinking of how do you create a digital country. Tuvalu is disappearing. So with that, I invite Philip to tell us a little bit about Peter and the Pacific Islands, and then he'll join me for a few questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. And firstly, I want to thank the board of CANTO for extending an invitation for my attendance. On my trip here, I was meant to have a 3-hour layover in Houston, which turned into 3 days. And it was due to the effect of Cyclone Beryl. And being from the islands, I accept that you have power blackouts, you live on sandwiches and crisps for about 3 days, you don't have any hot water. But when you don't have cold beer, that's a real struggle. But seriously, I do feel for those Caribbean islands that have been affected by the cyclones, because we've all been through that, and it's not a good time. And I extend my support for the recovery efforts that everybody's got to go through. I just want to do a quick introduction to PETA. It stands for the Pacific Islands Telecommunications Association. How do you move this thing? This thing?
Yeah.
There you go. So PETA, we're basically a not-for-profit organisation formed to represent the interests of the Pacific Islands in the field of telecommunications. Our objective, similar to CANTO, I believe, is to improve, promote, enhance, facilitate and provide telecommunications services within the members and associate member countries. Our membership is made up predominantly of licensed telcos in the region. We have 36 operators which are licensed members of our organisation. We also include as another membership category members of government, including regulators. And probably our biggest membership, which comprises about 400 members, is the vendor community. So we include vendors in our membership, and they contribute a lot to our ability to operate. We host 2 big events each year, similar to here. We have an annual general meeting and trade show around April, May, and we were able to extend an invitation to Lisa to attend our meeting in Vanuatu in April, May. And I've got to say, Lisa made a major impression on our membership, particularly at the CEO's Forum, particularly around the Fair Share initiative that CANTO is championing. And we feel from the PETA organisation that we'd like to partner and support that initiative, because we think it has a lot of relevancy in our own region. But when you talk about connectivity, and we've had a lot of talk about digital inclusion, closing the digital divide or creating the digital divide, depending on which side of that divide you are on. It's all about getting faster and more capacity. And I'll just do quickly a quick talk about get to faster on island time, Pacific Island context. This picture is a picture of the capital of the Cook Islands. It's my home island. And I just want to show the context of what you see in the Pacific. It's a lot of ocean, not a lot of land, and a lot of connectivity challenges. Probably a lot more so than you see in the Caribbean. And the real challenge is a challenge of scale. And recently, in 2022, the leaders of the Pacific Island Forum, which is similar to CARICOM, I believe, they made a declaration around the Blue Pacific continent, which is totally valid, because if you look at the Pacific Ocean, the islands, they're calling it the Blue Pacific continent. And they talk about a strategy for 2050, setting out the long-term vision of the region, and it's based on 4 pillars. Climate change action, of course, Lisa just mentioned it, it's important to the region. It's protecting the ocean's health and integrity. It's about sustainability and managing our island and ocean resources. And in blue there, it's about connecting the Blue Pacific continent by air, land, and ICTs. And that's a very noble declaration. But the reality of the Blue Pacific continent from an ICT perspective is we have 7 of the smallest countries in the world by population, and at least the smallest country in the Pacific is 1,500 people. That's Tokelau. We have 6 of the 10 smallest economies in the world, and they're called nano economies. These are economies with GDPs of less than $100 million. There's a real affordability challenge. And we've recently seen market distortion caused by well-intentioned low-interest loans and grants, and to a certain extent recently geopolitical plays. These are realizing solutions that are not sustainable, and they are being enforced on many of the countries in the region. We have a lack of regulatory capacity and competency, and we are the most expensive region in the world to service. Our major markets, closest major markets are 1,000 miles away from many of these island countries, and those markets are New Zealand and Australia. Up until 10 years ago, and this is part of the reason why we have to get to fast faster, is the only cable systems were north-south systems connecting Australia and New Zealand to North America. And this was up to about 10 years ago. In the last 6 years, you've seen this proliferation of east-west cables, which are starting to connect the major capitals of each of these islands. But they only connect main islands or capitals. There's plenty of disconnected islands that don't benefit from cable connectivity, still on satellite. So in the context of performance and quality of service, we have 3.5 million Pacific Islanders that have internet experiences of 10 to 100 kilobits per second. And the best average speed per user at peak hours is 8 megabits. That's in American Samoa. And this is very much a subsidized market, subsidized by the American government. All the other islands, you're looking at 500 kilobits, and in the Cooks we're doing 850 kilobits. So it's not, peak average user speed per user is fairly limited. Why? Wholesale cable pricing is the highest globally, and that's just a factor of volume and demand. Telcos have a lot of because predominantly they're connected by satellite, there was no real drive to invest in the access and transport networks. There's now a big drive to do that. It requires massive investment in submarine cables. We now have an abundance of capacity with these east-west cables, but the pricing inhibits take-up. And these cables only connect capital islands. They're missing the rest of the countries. And many of these island states, like French Polynesia, 300 islands. Fiji, nearly 400. Kiribati, about 60. So many of these island nations have multiple islands, and they're not connected by cable. Here's a disturbing stat. Of midlife cables in the islands, less than 2% of design capacity is being utilized. And in the newer cables, less than 1/1000th of design capacity is being utilized. So you have this massive investment in infrastructure and very little utilization. Low volumes keep unit pricing extremely high. So the next challenge, and I saw a presentation talk about these LEOs. The LEOs have been totally disruptive. They're unregulated in the market. They've come in with subsidized terminals and predatory pricing. They invest nothing in the country. They just export cash out of our economies. They don't pay tax. The regulators can only shake their fists at the sky. That's the extent. If the LEOs want to operate, they can operate totally unregulated. And it creates this data sovereignty issue. It means there's a total rethink of continuing investment in access and transport networks in many of our markets. These are the real disruptors, particularly where governments have invested significant capital in cable systems. But the LEOs, and I'm not just talking Starlink, you've got OneWeb entering the markets now, and Kuiper is a whole different proposition. And they are actually creating major uncertainty in our markets. So where's the money going to come to deliver on the Blue Pacific connectivity for ICT? Traditional financing models are not sufficient. It's an increasingly risky sector. We all know that the boom days of the 80s and 90s are well and truly over. This is a hard business to be in. For example, our internet margin is now down to 3%. You might as well not be in the business. And when we heard about this Fair Share initiative that Lisa presented at Mobile World Congress in February this year, we see that offers a lot of potential to contribute in some way to closing that, creating the digital inclusion that we all strive for. And we're really keen to partner with CANTO to raise the opportunity regionally and globally. So thank you for that. That's just a quick intro, and I think I've got some questions.
Philip, well, I am so glad you made it here after all. And of course, yesterday you should have been a participant on our panel, which was Achieving Gigabit Societies, Infrastructure, Investment, Sustainability. Had you been here yesterday, you would have heard a representative from Telefonica share with us the fact that based on their operations in several countries in Latin America, they were seeing something like 38% decline in revenue. You were fortunate to, I was fortunate actually to be invited to the CEO's Forum as part of the PETA AGM. And one of your operators, I'm not going to call the name of the operator or the island, but he presented in that CEO's Forum, and he said that over the last 5 years, his company saw a revenue decline of 26%. At the same time, their operational expenses increased by 25%, and a lot of that was associated with bandwidth and IP transit. As such, his EBITDA decreased by 77%. Off-island bandwidth, listen to this, folks, his off-island bandwidth cost was his single largest operational expense line, and that stood at 30% of his total OPEX. One item, off-island bandwidth. So it is clear that, and of course we have shared our own experience in the Caribbean about persistent revenue declines and coupled with exponential increase in data demands and the fact that those data networks are being utilized by big tech. And of course, he shared with us in the forum that off-island bandwidth was necessitated because of traffic generated by big tech operators. We've shared our experience in the Caribbean. You've heard from Latin America. We heard from Latin American countries yesterday. Can you share with us a little bit, Philip, what is the experience of other operators in your region as you try to deal with this issue of exponential data growth and tell us about the impact it's had on your operations?
I think the first thing, you've got the top line challenge. While you could possibly do things to maintain your revenue line, you're seeing your margin being squeezed aggressively because of your costs. Your costs are going up. And that's the worst thing. You know, your margin, any growth in your margin is gone. And while you're seeing, in the last 4 years, we've seen data consumption increase 6 times and the cost increase 3 times. So it's not a linear relationship, but it's still a cost increase. And nobody wants to pay for more consumption. And the last thing you want to do is go to unlimited broadband plans, because as soon as you go to unlimited, you flatten your top line. There's no growth there. And our problem is the LEOs have introduced unlimited plans to the region, which is the worst thing you could have done. And they're doing it on the basis of being able to enter markets with no regulation. So their cost base is just about zero. Effectively, my license costs me about $4 million a year. So you get Starlink into the market with no license fee, no obligation to provide universal access, which is part of our license. And so that's a real burden on many of the telcos. And I'm the same.
Yes.
As the major telco in the regions, you carry the burden of universal access. And that burden is now coming to the point where my board will no longer agree to any investment that doesn't generate a return on investment. And I talked about the digital inclusion, or closing the digital divide? It depends on which side of the divide you're on. Right?
Yes.
If you're on the side of the operator trying to close it, then not getting the investment capital to do anything about it, the divide is getting bigger rather than closing. And that's the real challenge.
Yeah.
So when politicians talk about universal access, they need to address the elephant in the room, which are these market entrants who are not contributing to that universal fund. And meanwhile, our margins are getting squeezed because we're having to deliver it.
Yeah. So I'm glad you raised the issue of what we identified yesterday in this forum as the investment gap. What will it take to bridge investment both in mobile networks and in fixed networks to ensure that countries such as ours, which are defined as SIDS by the United Nations, that we bridge that digital divide and we bring broadband connectivity to everybody. So while I was in Vanuatu, we looked at the ITU IDI index, which you heard Dr. Zava speak a little bit about this morning in his presentation when he talked about a principal focus of the ITU in terms of universal and meaningful connectivity. And the score out of 100. Yesterday, when I was here asking Minyor Clyburn about the United States scored 96.6, and even they still have a digital divide. When we looked at some of the countries in the Pacific, Fiji, 73%, 73 is their score on the IDI index. Samoa, 63, Tonga, 58. That tells you immediately that there's a huge gap in the Pacific Islands in terms of meeting the United Nations and the ITU goals for universal and meaningful connectivity in that part of the world. Yesterday, you heard the GSMAs tell us that in terms of a mobile investment gap for the Caribbean, that number is about 3.45 billion US. You heard Strand Consult say on the fixed side, the fixed investment gap in the Caribbean is about 8.45 to 12.45 billion US dollars. So and by the way, in the Caribbean as a whole, we score about on average in the 70s on the IDI index, right? So we are solid 20 points behind Europe and the United States in terms of ICT maturity and development. Given where the Pacific is, Philip, what are you guys doing in terms of identifying what that investment gap might be in your region, and how do you plan to go about filling it?
Well, there's only one success story in the Pacific, and that's in New Zealand and to a certain extent Australia. The New Zealand government funded fibre to the home under the universal ultra-fast broadband network built. They built it over 5 years, but they spent something like $3.5 billion to build it. And operators can then subscribe to that infrastructure to deliver retail services. And the same thing in Australia, NBN, National Broadband Network, funded by the government. There's no appetite within the island countries to fund that because many of our governments got other societal problems to deal with. First and foremost, you've got education, you've got health, you've got all those other societal challenges to deal with. And so the gigabit society it's not front of mind. There's an expectation that the sector self-funds it. And when you've got investors looking to derive digital inclusion, that's not going to happen. So we're in a bit of a quandary at the moment. The gap is significant in some islands and less so in others. So if you look across the Pacific, we've got French territories, we've got
American territories,
we've got New Zealand and Australia realm countries. So there's a whole lot of options around where you can get funding. But the more developed you get, and the Cooks has graduated development nation status, that's my home country, we can't get access to any grants or soft loans. We got to play with the big boys, and we're definitely not a big economy. But yeah, from a Peter perspective, we're we're working with the GSMA to generate a report on investment gaps. And we'll take that with a bit of grain of salt because the GSMA won't have access to all the data. But we're going to do our best to, from our membership, provide as much of that information as we possibly can to get the most accurate view of what the gap, how the gap is calculated and the magnitude of it.
Good. And you mentioned the political context a little bit in the Pacific. How do governments as policymakers understanding what the digital divide gap is and what will be required to get there, how are you lobbying the policymakers in terms of governments to frontally address these issues?
One of the problems we have, and I spoke to it earlier, is that we in the regulatory domain within the region, we're quite new. So there's a lot of capacity and competency skills to be built around that space. I know in the Caribbean, you've been doing this for quite a long time, but we're learning. But the good thing about this is an opportunity for the sector to be quite a strong influencer. And we're going to be doing that at the next PIFS meeting, which PIFS is like CARICOM, in November. We're writing a paper we submitted for the chairman of PIFS, who's the Prime Minister of Tonga, who was a former member of PETA, so we've got a bit of an open door there, and see if he can push this whole investment gap agenda and look at fair share as a possibly contribution to that.
Good, excellent. Right, Philip, thank you so very much for flying all the way from the Cook Islands to Miami to be part of this important conference. And I can tell you, on behalf of CANTO, we look forward to strengthening our relationship, and we look forward to your joining us on this journey of fair share, because it is truly a global movement. So welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Philip Henderson, joining us all the way from the Pacific Islands. Great conversation. Thank you very much, Lisa, for moderating that session. So we're moving straight into leading change, HR's mandate for AI advancement in the Caribbean. This session will be conducted by Richard Solomon, Managing Director and Principal Consultant, Development Consulting Center Limited, and Melissa Harris, CEO and Chief Learning Officer, Telecom Training Corporation. Please give them a round of applause.
All right, good. It's still good morning, and morning to Melissa as well. Melissa will be following me. I will lead off, and Melissa will take care of any messes that I made thereafter. Let me thank CANTO for having us here to present on this very important topic. And, oops, not that. Once we bring up these slides, let's do this. Can I ask you all to stand? And as you stand, can you think about a word? This will only take 60 seconds. Everyone stand. Think about a word or a short phrase that describes how your people in your organizations or in your organization feel about all of these changes that are coming down the pipeline. Find a word or a short phrase really quickly. Got it? Got it? Just quickly tell that word or short phrase to two other people, give them a bounce or a high five, and then grab your seat. Really quickly. Just tell it to two other people close by. This is 60 seconds. We've already lost 30 seconds. Grab your seats, and let me get 3 words. Can I get one from over here? Worried. Can I get one from over here? Overwhelmed. And what did you say at the back? All right, we're not waiting. Can I get one from over here? Harassed. And what about over here? Anxious. Now, this is understandable. And all of these phrases have one thing in common. They're emotional. I submit to you today that the biggest challenges you would have with trying to implement all of these new emerging technologies are not the technologies themselves. Said another way, the challenge at work is not the work, it's the people at work. Let me tell you something about our organization, and then we're going to get into the presentation. We're a 10-person team. We've been working with organizations around the world now for 25 years in 45 countries, really trying to build capacity around leadership and how organizations work and how they do well. Cluster of telcos on the left-hand side of the slide. So let me run past this, and these are the things I want us to focus on in my short time. We're going to look at the broad global context, bring that into the Caribbean region, examine HR's priorities for AI advancement, and then HR's role in humanizing AI. AI is a tool to support people. It's not the other way around. Yeah? So let's look at the global context. I'm not going to spend a lot of time because we've kind of hashed this out. So we're in the fourth industrial revolution, and all I want to say about this is that as time has passed, we've become more complex. So each successive industrial revolution has brought more complexity to the workplace. Some of the things that we see coming out of I 4.0, and I've highlighted those, 80% of jobs could be automated. Perpetual ambiguity. Hybrid organizations, and number 10, 65% of primary school children will have jobs that do not yet exist. That's an amazing thing, and I can't fully wrap my mind around it as a Gen Xer. Some of these future work numbers are startling. 75% of companies are looking to adopt these new technologies, with 34% of business-related tasks being performed by machines, and that could grow to 42% by 2027. We know that a lot of investment is going into artificial intelligence. Almost every presentation over the last few days has been about that. But it's disrupting how the organizations function. 44% of worker skills will be disrupted in the next 5 years, and there'll be a 23% labor churn, right? It means that there's a great requirement to retrain people. Let's bring it to the Caribbean. The Caribbean is not, the world is not a monolith, and as we work with leaders across the region, here are some of the things that we know. We know that the world is not a monolith, the Caribbean is different, and if you look, that red there, that's Latin America. Now, it's a small market, absolutely understood, but the growth is slower than most of the other spaces. Can you see that? The Caribbean is different. We are not the same, and very often we compare ourselves to some of the larger nations. This is about Caribbean energy transition readiness. It's a little bit different. This is about energy, but here's the thing. Look at the number here. In terms of readiness, human capital, we're down at 35%, which puts us in a disadvantageous position. Another few numbers to look at here. Can you see where the Caribbean falls in terms of the human capital index? Trinidad and Antigua, kind of in the middle. Yeah, Jamaica, Dominica, kind of in the middle in terms of human capital index. And similarly, for human development, we're also kind of in the middle. Now, why are these things important? I want you to remember this slide, or just remember the number. On average, a child born in the Caribbean can expect to attain 55, just about half of their full productive potential. Now, why is all of this important? But before I say that, it's important, but before I say that, we also have some labor relation challenges. Unlike some of our friends from the continents that have giant organizations with lots and lots of people, in Trinidad, where I'm from, you look at that chart, of 141 nations, we have the worst labor and employer relationships of 141 countries. Now, of 141 countries, according to the World Economic Forum, Lisa, we have, Trinidad and Tobago, the worst labor and employer relationships. Very contentious. You know this, right? But let me tell you why it's important. As we now look to put in all these new technologies, there's going to be labor market disruptions. And if you are a small organization employing X amount of people on a little island, it's not as simple when you have these kinds of relationships. Yeah. Plus, there's an economic fallout, and there's also a commercial fallout as well. So, what are HR's priorities? Well, the reason I focused here is this. In order to get the most potential, the most productive benefit out of these various emerging technologies, nations and organizations have to focus on both human capital as well as technology adoption. It's a tool. People have to use the tool. People have to accept the tool. And if I had time, I'd tell you some stories around that. So that is the thing. We need to have people who are going to use those tools, and that requires certain kinds of skills. I pulled these numbers from the McKinsey Institute, Global Institute, and we can see which skills, and we don't have them for the Caribbean. That's another thing. We are not producing nearly enough data in the Caribbean, but that's another discussion for another time. We can see technological and social and emotional skills going up, physical, manual, higher cognitive, and basic cognitive skills going down. That should not surprise anyone. To be made a little bit more specific, things like your manual labor, production, office, customer service work, those kinds of things are going to decline, and STEM and healthcare and other higher level skills are going to be required. So all that physical work is going to be mopped up by these new technologies, as we are already seeing, but that presents a problem. Because we'll have more higher wage occupations, they will rise, but the opposite will happen for lower wage occupations. And if your people are not ready, then what you have is more high wage jobs than workers to fill them. And then too many workers for the existing low wage jobs. There is an imbalance, and this is not just about commercial, this is also about the wider society. There's also a need for the right type of leadership. And as I work around the region, one of the things I have noticed is that we don't like to rock the boat. That's a problem. And I don't know. I mean, if I had the time, I'd say, can I get an amen? Because, there you go. We don't like. Why is that important? Well, from a technological standpoint, rather, let me do it this way. It used to be find something, learn it, and do it well, and keep doing it. Now it is find something, learn it, do it well, and question it, and change it. And very often the question and the changing, or the suggestion for change, is coming from someone who's half your age. But in our tribal system, yes, I said that right, because the chief is still very important. How dare you question the chief? See? So there is a need to retrain and to reskill people. This is not going to go away. Some of us will remember this movie, I, Robot, where Alfred Lanning said, I'm sorry, my responses are limited. You must ask the right questions. And if you've used ChatGPT, you know that if you ask bad questions, then you get so-so output. You have to ask the right questions. What's the question? This is the right question. How can HR champion the integration of AI and these machines, new technologies, and humans to create enhanced value for all stakeholders? It has to be for everyone. Everyone has to win, or else this will not work. This cannot just be a commercial enterprise, it also has to be a people enterprise. So here are a few things. One, understand the potential. What can it do? What can it do for us? What's the capacity that's going to be freed up? And then what are the impacts in terms of role composition and competency requirements? Plan a strategic workforce shift. Don't do this by accident. Plan it. Assess what do we have? What do we need in the future? Estimate do we need to recruit, retrain, upskill, reskill, redeploy. Study, are people connected? If they're not, how do we get people to be more connected? Thirdly, people development has to be a priority. I showed you before, it's 55% in terms of productive potential. It means there's a big gap. So that, how many HR people are in the room? I rest my case. So this is the thing. This is one of our challenges. Oh, there's a hand waving very frantically. Two, where again? 3, thank you very much. We need more HR people to come to this conference and to be involved because they have to champion this. They have to champion this. This is not going to be championed at the technological level. It has to be human-centered. So strengthen the capacity, accelerate the building of capabilities. We've got to train both technical and non-technical people to use and to roll this out. Leaders have to deploy an HR strategy that will fit what we're trying to accomplish in terms of the workforce and the operating model. And then fourthly, pursue executive education, because the people who make decisions in terms of what should be done, what should not, what's a priority, where do we need to spend money, those people need to understand what we're trying to accomplish, not just from a technological position, but also from a human resource position. The bottom line is the fourth industrial revolution is people powered. I know it's a lot of technology that's pushing this, but where does it come from and who's using it? It is people powered. Don't sleep on HR. If you do not bring HR to the front of this, then there's a real possibility that we will not get the kind of benefit. You will get benefit. It's just not going to be the kind of benefit, the extent of benefit that you otherwise could get. A couple more slides and we're going to wrap this up. We have to humanize this, both the introduction and its use. And I want to present or suggest to you a three-phase approach. One, technocratic, integrated, and then embedded. Very quickly, and I'm not going to hit everything on these slides. Feel free to come chat with me afterwards about this at my booth 31 before we tear it down. We're just about to tear it down. So challenges on the left, opportunities on the right before I hand over to Melissa. People are concerned about fears of recruitment, job losses. How do we integrate this thing? Is this private? Where is my data going to go? Do managers have an understanding of what's coming and how it impacts employees? Insufficient regulation. I don't know if any territory has yet written regulations for artificial intelligence and how we deploy that. And so on the opportunity side, decision makers need to be trained. We have to address this issue of trust of AI. Employees need to be part of the process. We do change with people, not to people. We say it again, we do change with, not to people. We have to develop a culture of innovation and empowerment so that people don't feel like they're on the back foot all the time and things are being poured down their throats, but they are involved and part of the process. I believe that the operators are also going to have to lead the regulators in this. But this is how it goes with legislation. It tends to follow practice. Yeah, so be ready for that. Secondly, there are challenges around, and this is in the integration phase. What will roles look like? How will jobs be designed? How will human and smart machines work together? How will human and AI cross-functional teams operate? What are the ethical concerns? What about the cultural differences? I don't know how we describe the culture of the machines. But we as humans, we see the world a particular way and we operate a particular way. We get tired at a particular time. What will that mean? I don't know. We have to answer these questions. How are we going to provide oversight and governance for these things? What about employee upskilling and reskilling? And then who's going to be responsible for what? A good place to start on the opportunity side is to augment existing skills, work with developers, this is important, to ensure AI usage is user-friendly, it's intuitive, it's explainable, it should not be something that's far away. How will humans and AI interact? What are the mechanisms that we will use for that? And then anticipate the developing and ongoing regulatory and compliance challenges and changes as they come. And lastly, the embedded phase. So, need to keep building a symbiotic relationship because these machines are going to get smarter. This is important to note. They're going to get smarter. And so that creates ongoing concerns. The research tells us that as machines get smarter, there's greater stress within the organization and anxiety for job security and concerns about fair treatment. So one of the ways we address that on the opportunity side, put humans at the center of development and deployment. So it has to be a human-centered approach. Find sustainable ways and resilient ways that humans and AI get together, focus on adherence to ethical rules. Here's the thing. People are going to do this whether you like it or not. What you want to do is get ahead of it and set the framework and the rules within which people could and should work. Address concerns about centralized power. Does it now mean, and people are thinking, does it mean that the power is going to sit in the hands of a machine? And where am I in all of this? Where's my power in all of this? Yeah? And then, of course, be a steward of the technology that enhances the human experience. What this means is the technology should enhance the human. People should have a better experience at work because of the technology, but we have to make it human-centered in that way. Folks, I know this has been fast. Melissa has some things to say, but let me ask you to scan this QR code. I'm gathering a little bit of information about some of these things here, and hopefully we'll be able to do some work around this. And I just want to leave you with a parting shot as you scan the QR code. Bring your HR people with you next year to the Bahamas, because we have more work to do, and we really have to look at what this will mean and how we're going to be rolling this out, and probably get some use cases coming out of the ensuing year. Melissa, handing over to you.
Wonderful.
Off
Let's give him a super big round of applause.
Thank you.
Wasn't that fabulous? Well, I am so delighted to be on stage to talk about the importance of HR leading the AI initiative in the region, because it's so big, it's overwhelming. And I was so lucky to get involved in the Caribbean the last time HR was asked to step to the table. And that was in liberalization, when many of us were monopoly environments, and all of a sudden the competition is coming. And all of a sudden we're like, whoa, what are we gonna do? And everybody's scared. And how do you deal with being an incumbent, and now you're a competitor, and now you're the new person in town? And so all of a sudden, CANTO decided we would have an HR committee of CANTO, and that we would help support the region going through this transition. Well, once again, CANTO said, hey, we want a presentation on, again, how should HR be involved in this huge change that we haven't seen, 20 years ago. Here's another huge thing that we should do. And I think the clicker is over here. Great, works. Wonderful. Have you heard of the acronym FUD, F-U-D? Show of hands, the FUD factor? Fear, uncertainty, and doubt. Don't you think that's where we are and where a lot of our employees are in terms of AI? We hear about AI. We're scared. There's a lot of uncertainty. What are we going to do? There's a million ways we could go. What are we going to do? And boy, that paralyzes companies. And it's like, well, boy, we could really do much better if we just, knew what direction to go. And the problem is we don't. We have a lot of data. I have a file on my computer, and I throw in about 100 different emails I get every day about the future of AI. It's overwhelming. There's so much we could do, but what are we going to do? And so it's like, man, maybe we should wait. Maybe we should wait until we know what to do, but the problem is that's never going to happen. And so the people who are moving forward now are the ones that are going to win, even in the midst of all this FUD, the FUD factor. So there's 3 things on this slide. I've got a million things I'd like to tell you, but 3 things on this slide. Those who move forward now are the ones who have the competitive advantage. And since we can't wait for certainty, there's 3 things that we can do. Communicate, communicate, and communicate. Communicate what we know and communicate what we don't know. The front line and the middle line teams are so empowered when our leaders go, hey, we wish we were superpowers and had all the answers, and we don't. And they're like, oh, really? So that makes them feel like, hey, that's a lot of credibility. So number 1, consistently communicate. We're overwhelmed with communications in the world today. The new marketing studies show that people have to hear something 14 times before they'll remember it nowadays. So communicate and communicate and communicate in every way we can. Number 2, sincerely empathize. People want the leaders to say, we want to care for everybody in the region, in our companies, our families, and we sometimes aren't going to know what to do. We're going to do the best we can. We're going to have a strategic plan. We're going to have to change. We're going to be flexible. We've got to be resilient, because one thing we start today, we may have to change tomorrow, and that's the reality. Because we don't know. And number 3, stay flexible. When things don't work, fine. Celebrate that and move forward and learn from that. So those three things: consistently communicate where we are, where we're going, why we're doing it. Number two, sincerely empathize with the fear, uncertainty, and doubt they're feeling since we're feeling it. And number three, staying flexible and resilient. So I've lost my clicker here. Let's get it over here. So that sums up really what I want to say. But I thought I sent an email before the conference to all the HR leaders that I knew in the region after having worked here for about 20 years. I said, hey, we're going to have this presentation Wednesday. We'd love for you as HR leaders to tell us what your strategies are, what you're doing, kind of have many case studies, give you some PR. And I expected to be flooded by every operator in the region telling us, hey, here's what we're doing, we're proud of it, tell everybody. And all of a sudden I went, I'm not getting any responses. Did I step in a political quagmire and upset people? And why aren't people telling me we're doing this and we're doing this and doing that? And, there's always a competitive aspect of that. But I talked with Franklin Butler yesterday, the president and group CEO of Cable Bahamas, also involved with Alive. Do we have anybody in the room from Bahamas, from Cable Bahamas? The lights I can't hear. Raise your hand wildly if you're from there. Oh, but you can still appreciate. Okay, thank you. So if you look at the top of this slide, Franklin Butler recently attended an HR conference. Like, well, what's he doing? He's a CEO. Well, he wanted to find out, it was an HR conference where HR leaders from all sectors, not just our sector, not just telecom and ISPs and all that, 65 professionals in HR plus you see in the picture here, because I wanted a deep dive into how to prepare for AI. And I thought that was the hallmark of a leader to do that, because he's like going, hey, it's not HR, it's our company. And he thought this was the best strategy to prepare his company for the future of AI. And so at the very bottom under the picture, I have really carefully repurposed the content in a article he gave me, Dave Ulrich. The information of this article is under the slide, so I just wanted to tell you, I'm going to highlight this article and give them the credit for all this wonderful research. If you want to take a picture of any one thing on this presentation, here is a 10-step process. Since I've done training all my life, I'm like, great, we got these great ideas and visions, and we know AI and all this is happening, but what do we do? We got to know what it is, but then what are we going to do? 10 steps. So this article highlights 10 excellent steps. And I've put little arrows out in the left-hand side of the areas in which they were my favorite. And so if you want to do an assessment in how your company is progressing, this is a wonderful little tool. But number one, the first step, it's a sales job. We got to articulate why we're doing this. Nobody wants to change. So we want to talk about how AI is going to transform our countries, our companies, ourselves, and get away from talking about this technology that's scary. Most people are scared of technology, especially when they think it's going to take their jobs away. So let's start talking about, from a sales perspective, what are the benefits? So I love this first sentence. AI is not about technology per se, but about how to use technology to help a business be more efficient. So change our language here. We know that AI is going to help the business in several ways. Number one, we're going to be more efficient, we're going to be more productive, we're going to be more cost effective. Those are the benefits to be telling our team, to start taking some of this fear of, oh, it's going to take my job. So secondly, the second step in creating a strategy for AI deployment is making sure we're including all the stakeholders. And that's why CANTO was saying, hey, maybe we need to look at AI in our region like we did with liberalization 20 years ago, because it affects so many different stakeholders. And AI, like liberalization, is intended to help each stakeholder, human, etc. They need to understand what AI is and how it's going to help their lives. And the bottom line is, when they start seeing that AI can be a friend versus an enemy, then the things like efficiency and productivity and things can happen. This slide from the article did a great job highlighting the various stakeholder groups that we've got. So who else in an organization is best equipped to help develop plans to include all stakeholders in our strategy? And I will pause. I see the cameras, the cell phone cameras going on this one. And this article did a great job on this, I thought. Number 3, now I love this because it's like, where do we start? Like AI, and I'm like, oh. So who's going to be accountable to lead the initiative within our organizations? And again, this article said, well, 2 approaches. We got an individual approach, we got a team approach. So you might have your senior leader sponsor the AI initiative, but you need someone who is going to be accountable, specifically accountable. So 2 options in the middle of the slide. It might be an HR professional that has technical skills, analytical skills, big data skills. That's kind of hard to find. You know, there's now a new MBA you can get in AI prompts. You know, big new job happening. So it's hard to find in today's world a lot of HR professionals that have both the technical and analytical skills we need. So perhaps in the region and in the Pacific Isles as well, in environments like this, we might need a team accountability. Years ago when I headed up AT&T's national sales training, the big initiative, this is a long time ago, is change. Change management. How are we going to do all this quality control groups? So we created teams, but we've got to make sure a team, like the quality initiative years ago and the AI initiative now, we've got to make sure that these teams are held accountable to make these changes occur. The teams need to include ideally HR, IT, operations, finance, and marketing. So that's a team, a cross-functional team that can run the ball with AI for your company. And there are 4 jobs. Again, I love the article highlighting the 4 major areas of focus. Number 1, define goals, specific, measurable, et cetera. Oversee the investments, because we can buy 1 million AI tools. You know, like Leslie at Incas has this great platform now that has a bunch of the tools they bought, and you can access them all. I mean, that's a cost-effective strategy he's offering to the region. So, define goals, oversee investments, manage the processes, because that's where AI is going to make the biggest difference in our companies, and reporting progress. So, develop talent who can do AI. Again, we're probably going to have to upskill our HR leaders' skills to get this work done. How can we do that? Collaborating with IT experts locally or globally. Make sure that we're educating all of our HR staff. And again, the message from HR, AI isn't going to take your job, but what we need to remember is people who know how to use AI, they might be the ones taking our jobs. So all of us in this room is going to have to upskill and cross-skill and get prepared, because it's coming whether we want it or not. So in terms of creating responsible and harmless policies, HR can lead in that respect as well. We know there's HR risks. We want to make sure we've got responsible AI policies to do what we can to be sure we're not going to create harm. Using simple language, not going to go into a great depth. This article highlighted making sure we're keeping it simple while smiling, the KISS principle. Again, where AI is going to make the big difference up front is upgrading our business processes here. Every part of our organizations have processes, and that's what we'll be automating once we kind of get our hands around that and improving those processes. Number 8, creating metrics to guide and measure success. We know we can't expect what we don't inspect by measuring. Starting with the low-hanging fruit. One of my favorite ones here. We got to get some wins under our belt to show people AI is our friend and can help us enjoy our jobs even more. So, what can be done quickly and fast? I've highlighted in yellow the 4 major areas. Number 1, in AI, when we're deploying it, we'll be assisting our employees. Second phase, second generation, informing people Number 3, guiding. And last but not least, providing the stakeholder value. And right now, this slide that again came from that wonderful article shows in this S-like curve, there is a gap between what HR is doing and what we need in AI. We're about 30% in on that. And over time, through this S-curve, we will be forging a more complete relationship there. Again, the 4 stages to make progress, where we assist, we inform, we guide, and finally provide the stakeholder impact that is our ultimate destination. And last but not least, like Richard was saying, we've got to put the human aspect in it. The AI technology is scaring the world right now. And the key is it complements our human capacity. It allows us to blend human creativity, and together we get the informed intelligence and wisdom that can transform our roles. So CANTO had an HR committee for a long time. For years, I chaired that committee. And on the Thursdays and Fridays after a conference, we would typically have an HR forum where we would fly in. We had no budget, but I had known all the HR leaders at Comcast and AT&T and T-Mobile and Verizon, invited them in and come to talk to the region about HR initiatives. And we had hoped that HR folks would come in with the CEOs at the beginning of the HR conference to be in the CANTO experience, to really see how they can make a difference in terms of business leadership. And that really didn't happen. We started having the HR leaders come in on Wednesday afternoons. So over time, we disbanded. We didn't have a lot of support for the HR committee. So CANTO is kind of wondering, hey, do we have enough synergy now? Should we reestablish the HR committee? And so if you think that is something important, if you can share your feedback with me as well as the CANTO team, that would be much appreciated. So that was kind of one reason we were having this presentation today, is to get your feedback on whether you think we should invest again and restart our HR committee. So that's about it. So again, I want to thank the CANTO team for inviting us, Richard for doing such a great job, and thank you very much. Look forward to your questions and feedback.
Thank you very much, Melissa Harris, CEO and Chief Learning Officer, Telecom Training Corporation, leading change HR's mandate for AI advancement in the Caribbean. Richard Solomon, Managing Director and Principal Consultant. Please give him another round of applause. And it appears that we should be reinstituting that HR committee, Melissa. So another round of applause for the great presentations. Do you know, just before, when you're running a marathon, just before the finish line is where it is, you get the most tired. But you always have people at the end of the race who are cheering you on and saying, we can do it. We're almost there. So CANTO, we are almost there. And we have an exciting presentation now from Eldred Garcia, Senior Vice President, Business and Partner Development, First Atlantic Commerce. And he's going to take us through the life cycle of a breach from compromise to exploitation. Please, a round of applause. A big round of applause.
This is going to be a high-level presentation. We don't have a lot of time, but this is a very important presentation for me. It's near and dear to my heart. I've asked one of our strategic global partners in the fraud prevention space to join me. The idea was to have a little bit of a Q&A during the presentation because, you know, it's important to ask the questions in real time. However, due to the lack of time, we're going to try to probably move the Q&A to our booth. It's important to note that everything I'm going to show you here, we're going to have like live sessions at our booth. So if you want to see some of this stuff in our booth, these are the subject matter experts. We brought them for you guys. And like I said, we're going to have live sessions at our booth. Now, in the past, they've asked me to come and talk to you about emerging technologies, specifically in the payment space. So I'm from First Atlantic Commerce. We're a payment provider in the region. We process about 80% of all the e-commerce volume in the Caribbean and in Central America. And the last time I was here, I talked about the emerging technology specifically with regards to mobility. So not only how to make payments with your phone, but how to accept payments with your phone. That technology is no longer, I was talking about, is in the future. This should be rolling out sometime this month. So we're moving quite quickly with regards to that. I also spoke about fraud prevention. And in the previous presentation, they talked a little bit about the uncertainty with artificial intelligence. We're moving very quickly with artificial intelligence, and we're incorporating all of that into our solutions, whether it's payments, in emerging channels like social media and social commerce to identify patterns of behaviors and anticipate purchases that can happen and personalize transactions for customers. But we're also embedding artificial intelligence in fraud prevention. This is extremely important. We're processing millions of pieces of data every second, but every individual is virtually impossible for humans to analyze that kind of information. We have to leverage artificial intelligence in order to do that effectively. And with our strategic partner, CANTO, that's here with us, they use artificial intelligence and machine learning to do just that, to look at transactions in real time, process millions of bits of information, and determine with a very accurate level of certainty the level of risk of a transaction. This is important for all of us, especially merchants and financial institutions, to determine if that transaction should go forward or it should be stopped. That does a number of different things. One of the things that it does, it reduces the cost for banks and merchants because bad transactions don't get pushed through the system, which cost. But it also allows you to start looking at different types of businesses. Businesses that you would traditionally not get into because it's a high risk, and those high risk businesses also have high returns. But merchants and banks have shied away from those kind of businesses because of the associated risk. Now with artificial intelligence, we can determine what's going on with a transaction, identify those transactions that have high risk, stop them. But those that are in the high risk, high return space, we can determine and reduce that risk and then start recognizing that additional revenue. So today, what they asked me to do is, we always talked about fraud prevention. There is a number of different steps along the way that we all can participate in stopping fraud. We are in the tail end of fraud prevention. Once it's been stolen, once it's been sold, once it's been bought, once it's being used, that's where we are at. How do we identify stolen information, bad information? How do we stop it? We do it with CANTO, but that's in the tail end. Today's purpose of the presentation is to walk you through the cycle of a data breach and understand where in that cycle can your organization try to stop that information before it gets all the way to us. Make sense? Okay. If we can, there we go. Thank you very much. So fraud, as we know, is a 365, 24/7 operation. While we need to be on this all time, and the only way we can do this, obviously, is using AI and all that kind of stuff, please understand that this is happening in the same time on the other side of the fence. Fraudsters, it's not one person in their flip-flops in the basement of their house doing, no. This is organizations, sometimes state-sponsored organizations. They're working 24/7 to find vulnerabilities. They're leveraging AI the same way we're doing it, right? So everybody's heard of ChatGPT, right? ChatGPT exists for the bad guys too. So chat bots and chat ransomware and chat, it goes on and on. They have the same tools that we have to do good, they have to do bad. So this is a 365 operation. So let's talk about the first phase, the breach, where they actually steal information. If you read up here on the screen, you'll see it takes on average about 256 days from a breach occurring for detection to happen. That means somebody breaks into your system, and there's a difference between a breach and a compromise, right? A breach is somebody breaking into your system. This is happening all the time. Basically, three types of organizations out there, and I've said this in the past. Those have been breached, those are going to get breached, and those are being breached and you just don't know it. Why? Because they're in your system almost 300 days doing nothing. All they're doing is looking. So you haven't been able to detect them. The presentation right following mine will be an individual talking about how to do cybersecurity and how to address fraud at this level, right? So they break into your system, they're rummaging around, they're looking for valuable information to steal. That's a long time for somebody to be in your system looking for stuff without you knowing they're there. Once they understand and find the pot of gold, if you will, this is where the compromise happens. They have automated solutions to extract that information. It happens in real time. Once they extract it, that's when you normally get identified. That's when triggers happens, when red flags go up, and that's when your IT department starts running around and contacting everybody, hey, something is going on. Something is going on, but it already happened. They already found the information, they already took it. It usually takes anywhere between 30 to 60 days for them to understand where it happened and to try to stop it from continuing happening. So think about that. Add 30 days on top of that 256. So you can see the time it takes for a data breach to happen and then a compromise. So what happens after they steal it? Now is the fun part for them. Now they go darknet. So we all work in the internet. There's a darknet underneath, right? Depending on the amount of data that's stolen, this can be ready, put together within minutes, days, or weeks to be used. So they get this information, and they're not very picky about what they take. They take everything they can. So they're not only taking payment information, which impacts us directly, but they're also taking personal information, right? So your name, your address, your email, your phone number, your mother's maiden name, so on and so forth. They're taking everything. And once they take everything, they go darknet, and they start compiling this information. So think about an organization like in the normal world. They grab all these pieces together and they start putting these things together. They start categorizing the information. They start packaging the information. And they start pricing the stolen data. They start sorting it out by financial records, personal information, which is PII, login credentials. When I point to login credentials, you may have heard just recently, within a week or so, the largest password data breach globally occurred about a week ago. About 10 million passwords were compromised. This is extremely important because when we're talking about passwords, most of us, some of us not, but most of us use the same password for multiple areas that we access. This is dangerous for obvious reason. You compromise one area, you're going to compromise them all, right? Most of us use password. I don't understand why we're still using password as a password. 1, 2, 3. They're using stuff that doesn't make sense to me, but people are trying to make it easy. And then worst of all, they create a password and they put a sticky on it and they put it on their computer, which blows my mind. But this is happening. This is not funny because it's actually happening. There are solutions out there that help you manage all these passwords. They generate new passwords. They remind you to update your passwords. Don't show me your hands, but how many of you have updated your password to your financial institution, to your computer, to your sensitive information? Probably you haven't. The only time you normally update your password is when you work for an organization and they force you to say, yeah, your password is expired, you can't use it again, you have to update your password or you can't access the system. That's when you update those passwords. But your personal password, you probably haven't updated them in a while, right? And hopefully it's not the name of your children or your dog or something like that. So now that the data is packaged and listed on the underground and forums for sale, they've put this thing together. And there's a darknet. Think about Amazon, but not Amazon. Think about Amazon, the bad Amazon in the darknet. So now they start selling this. They start selling this through decentralized networks of computers that are not regulated, they're not or monitored by the government or other authorities. It's often used for illegal activity. If you may remember, there used to be, this was a while ago, a company called Silk Road. I don't know if you guys remember that. Silk Road was darknet. They sold everything. I'm not going to get into detail, but most of the stuff you guys don't want to hear about. They sold everything down there. We finally stopped them, the government. But remember, this is the cloud, right? So you stop them and they pop up somewhere else. It's not like you shut down a building and you put chains around the doors. They're in the darknet. This darknet exists, and this is where they sell the information. It's an underground economy. You can read the information up here. Buyers include cyber criminals, but also individuals looking to seeking personal information for financial gain or revenge. Transactions negotiated is a negotiation process between buyers and sellers. A little bit complex, but nonetheless, it's happening in real time. And people go in there and they ask, just like you go to Amazon, you want Red Sox and you large and you want a hat and this, you can go in there and say, I want 5,000 platinum cards or gold cards issued by a specific bank in a specific country, in a specific city with this zip code. So when they use it in a way that they have compiled the personal information and the stolen data, so it doesn't trigger as many red flags. This is where these individuals come in. They're using their systems, their solutions, their advanced AI formulas to understand all this data, because everything can look normal based on the stuff that I just mentioned to you, but if the device fingerprinting attributes of the transaction that was generated, or the email, or the IP, or the service provider was identified, Belarus, Russia. Sorry if I'm not picking on anybody, but just on the other side of the world. Their systems can identify it and tell you, hey, everything looks good, but this transaction is bad. You may not be able to see it, but this information over here was already been used in fraudulent activity. This is in real-time artificial intelligence, what these individuals do. The use of stolen data. So 18% of stolen data is used within an hour, 40% within 6 hours, and 50% or more within 12 hours. Criminals utilize stolen data for malicious activities. Scenarios include identity theft, financial fraud, credential stuffing attacks, using credentials to access account and sensitive data, bank accounts, stuff like that. Using stolen PII, was personal information, and PCI, which is payment information, to perform financial transactions. And again, I mentioned there's a cycle, right? It gets stolen, it gets packaged, it gets sold, and then it gets used. We're at the tail end of this cycle. So we're doing everything we can, but it's more of a reactive nature. And while we have advanced solutions and they're getting better and better, and we are now reducing not only the level of fraud in the environment, increasing the level of authorizations, because before these tools, merchants and banks were taking strategies that weren't really business-wise, right? They were trying to squeeze the pipe, the volume of transaction, hoping to push out bad transactions. But when you do that kind of strategy, not only do you push out bad transactions, you push out good transactions. So the level of authorizations in the industry in our region was running around 80%. That's really low. So implementing a solution like this, we have already seen that 80% on average increase to about 99.6% authorization levels consistently. So what we're doing is we're identifying to banks and to merchants, hey, there's a lot of business you're bringing in that you're leaving at the door. Implementing these kind of solutions is great, but again, is at the tail end of the cycle. We need to start talking about what can we do to devalue information, make it worthless, encrypting it, tokenizing information. It's not really to prevent a data breach, it's really to deter. We can't keep people from breaking in. They're very, very good at what they do. But we can deter them if there is nothing to steal. If we take the gold out of the vault, they're not going to break in. The risk for them is too high if there's nothing to take. So if you're going to take anything away from here, it's not really a prevention strategy, it's a deterrent strategy. And you do that by devaluing information, right? Tokenizing information, so to make sure that you're not the point of least resistance when people go out there and try to steal information. So just a little bit of information so you can understand and put some of this stuff in perspective. 3,200 data breaches occurred last year, a 78% increase from 2022. We talked about AI earlier. This is going to get worse. It's not going to get better. You don't have an individual trying to create malicious information or tools to break in. You have AI now making that much faster, much better. You have generative AI. So another topic that we haven't necessarily covered from my end is the conversation about AI. AI is an umbrella. You have ChatGPT, you have large language models, you have generative AI. They all don't mean the same. ChatGPT is a version of AI. Generative AI is probably, for me, one of the scariest things from my perspective because it is AI acting by itself, generating information by itself. It's not like ChatGPT, you ask it a question, it gives you an answer. Generative AI is generating this by itself. From a fraud perspective, imagine a computer being able to identify vulnerabilities and how to create fraud better for us to have to fight. I talked a little bit about the latest breach. Well, we're going to skip that one. It talks about password breaking. It's a holistic approach that we take, that you need to take. Encrypt information, tokenize information, use multi-factor authentication. I know it's a pain, and every time you log in and you have to give credentials and making sure you're you and put biometrics. But if you don't and you leave everything open, people will get in. We're today in an environment that you're probably connected to Wi-Fi. How many people are, don't raise your hand. How many people are connected to the Wi-Fi and are using a VPN? Don't tell me. If you're not, you are. Good. I'm glad you're using a VPN, virtual private network, which means that if you're connected to free Wi-Fi, it's free for you and free for the bad guys, right? So if you're connected to it, they can sniff. It's called a sniffer. They can find out and they can get into your system backwards. So please make sure that if you're connecting with your personal devices, your computer devices into free Wi-Fi, understand that free has a cost, right? Not at the front, usually in the back. There's a difference between cybersecurity and cyber intelligence. The gentleman who's going to come up after us is going to be talking about cybersecurity. Cyber intelligence is a little bit different than this. Cyber intelligence is those professional hackers, the people who work for the NSA and the FBI and the Secret Service, professional hackers, right? This is what they do for a living. These people live in the darknet, where all the stuff gets stolen, gets sold, gets packaged. They monitor the darknet. So when information is compromised and it gets to the darknet, they're there to identify that information and they're able to alert their customers. So there's companies that focus on cyber intelligence. Information gets stolen, specifically for financial institution, telecommunications company. You're talking about usernames, passwords, all that kind of information. When it hits the darknet, you have a window. Typically, it's about a week. Typically. That information hits the darknet, these folks identify the information, and if you're their clients, they alert you, hey, your password, your credentials just showed up. They're being packaged, they're getting ready to be resold. Why is this important? You take a proactive response to fraud prevention, right? You know it's stolen, you know it's going to be used. It allows you the opportunity to change those credentials, those passwords. On a financial institution side and with credit cards, it allows you to block bins. So a whole set of cards that have been compromised, they're able to go in there and block them before they get used. This is just a little bit peek behind the curtains. You can see this in real time at our booth, but this is what happens, and you can see in there where in the middle, the big box, there's AI machine learning. So all the transactions are going through. This is happening in real time, analyzing the transactions. Ton of data, anywhere between 150 to 240 pieces of data from all parts of the transaction are coming through and being analyzed to determine the level of risk of this transaction, to quickly tell you this transaction is good, this transaction is bad, let it go through, or stop it. Stop it because we don't want to send junk through the system and it's going to cost us. So they can walk you through this, they can talk to you about AI, how they use it, and how they customize it for an individual merchant or a bank. This is important. As technology progresses, as we roll out new technology, that technology is going to be embedded with artificial intelligence. This is great. However, with all this advancement, you have more and more and more data, right? There's more opportunities for bad folks to do bad things. So we have a strategy, if you will, at Fresh Atlantic Commerce. Protect the house first and then add new technology. Don't just add new technology for the sake of new technology and not protect the house, because you're just going to make the situation worse. I'm going to skip the last one. Questions and answers. Please come to the booth. More than happy to answer any of your questions, show you in real time how this all works, and I hope that you took some valuable information away from this session. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Eldred. A lot of valuable information taken from that session. So password is not a good password. Thank you very much, Eldred, for that great presentation. So at this time, just before we have our cybersecurity presentation, Jennifer Astroff, who is our CANTO CSR Working Committee Chair, is going to come up for a few minutes to tell us a little bit about some of the initiatives of the CSR Working Committee. Can you please give Jennifer a round of applause?
Thank you, Rochelle. And it's Janice. But that's okay. Hi, everyone. Just a couple of seconds I need from you. It's going to be something a little bit different than what we've heard the past couple of days. Very interesting, but this is also very important. This is bigger than what all of us do here today. It's our CSR awards that we want to present to you. I'm Janice Asraf. I'm the chair of the CSR committee, and this is Whitney DeRape. She's the vice chair, and thank you so much. What we'd like to present here today is we are launching at this conference our CSR Sustainable Development Champions Award project. And what does that entitle? You know, we're talking a lot about the technological developments in our region, but if our region is suffering, if the world is suffering, how far are we going to go? So that's why we at CANTO want to connect with our work with the Sustainable Development Goals that we have to reach in 2030. And that's not far from where we are today. So there's a lot of work to do. But there's a lot of initiatives in the Caribbean region as well. And we would like to highlight that as well. It's not just our work, but we would like to highlight the work that you guys do. It starts with one person. It starts with you. And when it starts with you, it becomes us. So please keep in mind what we're going to do. I would like to ask Whitney to give us the information.
So hi everyone. Janice was supposed to tell you also about the e-waste project we are doing in different countries in the Caribbean, but we will share that information also with you. But for the Sustainable Gold Champion, next year we will be announced. Where is the CANTO 40th annual conference? No, I couldn't hear you guys. In the Bahamas, yes.
So it's going to be a party.
Yes, so we're not just creating a bus, but we're creating a better Caribbean future, and we would like you guys to join also and be part of that amazing journey. We will send all the information through the different CANTO communication platforms, but also the social media platforms. So stay in touch. But if you see Janice and I the coming week, you can just contact us or otherwise the CANTO members. So guys, be ready. Yes. And I wish you a lot of success with this initiative.
Okay. Well, thank you so much. And please do your CSR part in your countries and let us acknowledge everything that you're doing. Thank you so very much.
Thank you very much, Janice and Whitney. Our CSR champion goals, it starts with one. Another round of applause. Looking forward to those presentations in the Bahamas next year, July, for CANTO's 40th. So at this time, we are going to have our cybersecurity presentation. Right after, we're going to have the draw. So don't move. But ladies and gentlemen, Paul Elins, who is Director, Chief Information Security Officer of Cybersecurity Center of Excellence, is going to present to us on cybersecurity in the digital age, protecting the Caribbean's digital future. A big round of applause.
Thank you. Mic check. Can we have the presentation up? Yes, I'll have to do it without slides. A second. All right, here we are. I was afraid I was going to be one between you guys in the lunch, but it's during lunch. It's even worse, but that's okay. The ones that are here are interested, right? We all know cybersecurity is a big thing. We talk about it a lot. We talk about a lot about the problem. I'm here to talk about the solutions. I'm Paul. I'm a father, engineer, ethical hacker, entrepreneur, and director of the Cybersecurity Center. I have a background in, cybersecurity, of course. I've been trained in cyber warfare, ethical hacking, information security management, incident response, and those kind of things. So together with my team in Aruba, Suriname, Belize, and in Europe, we do SOC, governance, and CERT services. So SOC, Security Operations Center, we actively monitor attacks, and we try to stop the bad guys from doing what they like to do. We also do governance, so information security management. We set up management systems. We help organizations get certified to certain standards. We even are the CISO of several organizations, larger organizations, government organizations that don't have an own CISO. We do that for them. And the third pillar, we do emergency response. We try not to do that, but it does happen. So it is something that we do, well, too often actually. So we've been involved in kicking hackers out of hospitals. Really, they deployed ransomware inside hospitals where newborn babies or premature babies, they need that equipment to survive. And these hackers, they don't care. They just want you to pay up, right? And if you can recover from your backup, then they'll extort you because they have your data and they're going to sell it on the dark web and whatnot. So in the past year, we've also done incident response for energy companies in the region. Of course, I'm not going to mention which ones, but it's bad enough that potentially an entire country can go dark. If they jump from IT to OT, so from the IT environments to the industrial control systems, then they really are able to have real physical impacts on things like energy networks. Large vital public organizations and also telcos, we know that telcos also have been hit hard in the region. So to protect that future, we need to know what the future is. And to be honest, I don't know. You probably also don't know. What is the combination between quantum computing and AI going to be in the 7G network? We don't know, right? What I do know is going to be very, very technology dependent and network dependent, data dependent. So cybersecurity is going to be even more important down the road than it is already today. And if we're looking at what's happening, you see here an attack map. That's our small island of Aruba right there. That's actually just a regular internet connection that we're monitoring. We set up honeypots, so fake infrastructure, just to see what the attackers are trying to do and how often they do it. And this is just a map, so every time they hit us, we see that. And well, this is not our study, but it's a study done that the amount of traffic. So I've heard, big tech needs to pay its fair share because they're using our networks and large proportion. Well, the bad bots that are attacking us, and sometimes about 2 million times a day on a regular internet connection, they use about 1/3 of internet traffic. So if big tech has to pay its fair share, these guys are free riding and taking 1/3 of your infrastructure for use just to do these attacks. right? And those are the bad bots. You have the good bots, the Google crawlers and indexers and those. And about half of the traffic is human traffic, so like watching Netflix and whatnot. So it's really a big share, and once you start monitoring that, you see that this is not something we might get hacked. No, this is constantly battering at the door. We also see what they're trying to do. So on the left side, you see the users that they're trying to use to log in, and on the right side, you see the password that they're trying to log in. So yeah, previously in the previous presentation, it was mentioned, password's still a thing. It is still a thing. But not only that, they'll also go after vulnerabilities within your networks and try that. So this is just in a week time. Which countries from where it originates. And it's funny because if you see at Russia, it's almost none. Why not? Because they'll pass their traffic via other countries, right? So we know we have a problem, and I took a little bit of an ambition goal here. I wanted to reduce cyber risk with 90% in the next 10 minutes. So we have a 10-point plan that you can use, that you can reduce your cyber risk with 90%. Now, usually if a vendor tells you that and they're trying to sell you something, it's not true. There is no single solution that does that, right? But just, I wonder, by raise of hands, which of you and your organizations have not been hacked the past 5 years? Everybody's been hacked? Pretty much. Yeah. I know some. I'm not going to mention anybody. No, but I mean, we really have to stop victim blaming. This is happening all over the place, and that's one of the points as well coming up. If this hotel, if the bomb explodes, are we going to blame the hotel? No, we're not. So why are we blaming the organizations that are getting hacked? And we don't want to talk about it. We don't want to share information with each other, right? So this is the plan, 90% reduction in cybersecurity risk, which is very ambitious, but I truly believe, in my experience, this is true. Unfortunately, it's not a very easy plan, right? So treat cybersecurity as a business problem. More often than not, from the IT or cybersecurity side, yeah, I talked to the CEO and the CFO, but I need, $200K for a new firewall, and I just don't get it. They're not listening to me. Yes, but you're talking IT, you need to talk business. So if your organization, just think of the impact of a full-blown cyber attack and the impact. What would it cost? Backups gone, data gone, you need to rebuild everything. What would that cost? And what are the chances? So if you have a 20% chance of losing $10 million, that's a $2 million risk per year. If you can spend $200,000 to halve that risk, then you have a very good return on investment, right? So really think of it as a business problem, not only as a technical problem. We heard a lot about AI already, but how do we do that? Yeah? Let AI work for you in your cybersecurity program. You have to do that. The bad guys, the attackers, they're getting way more advanced doing that. So we really need to do that. Now, how do you do that? Well, there's many ways, but how do we do that? Basically, we set in an appliance that is running AI, that is learning everything that's going on your network. So we take a network tab, we learn everything, and we start detecting anomalies, right? The printer server should not be talking to the billing server, for example. If it doesn't do that, if it does that, it's fine, then we learn that, and if it's not normal, then that's an anomaly, right? So this is something that we could do. If you're interested, you can talk to us. We could chip in an appliance for free, let it run for a month, see what it does, and see what it detects, and see what it can stop. Fix the basics. I know telcos have a lot of legacy and multiple networks, and we're moving very fast, and it's very complex, and a lot of servers and a lot of cloud workload, but the basics often need fixing, and also the users. So my predecessor here on stage said, yeah, just last week they compromised 10 million credentials. It wasn't 10 million, it's 10 billion with a B. So if you want to have 10 billion usernames and passwords, just Google RockU, 2024, and you will be able to download them. 10 billion usernames and passwords. More likely than not, passwords from your employees, from your organizations are in there, and they are using them, right? So when ethical hackers like us get hired to try to pen test systems, that's the list we're going to throw at your systems, and we're going to get in. Why? Because we expect users to change their passwords and their login credentials and have multi-factor authentication all over the place. So you need to give them the tools. One of the tools that we use is Keeper, and it also checks for those compromised credential usages. It gives you a score on your organization, and it helps you improve that. So next point, adopt a framework. Which of your organizations is already using a cybersecurity framework actively? NIST, ISO 27000. Yeah, I know we help you with that. So don't reinvent the book. Don't just do stuff. Look at ISO 27001, for example, or any other framework, and go at it in a structurized way. That's also how we can get to the 90%, by the way, because these frameworks have a lot of controls that you can implement, and that reduces the risk. So if you don't know where to start with it, look at the CIS 18, the top 18 controls, and see how your organization is doing. Have a layered defense, right? So think of it as a castle, multiple layers to get in. A small example, phishing. If your organization depends on users not getting phished, I mean, that's not a good spot to be in. One of the best phishings I saw recently was a law office. They did some investigation and on Facebook and whatnot, and then they send a phishing mail from a law office to the husband with divorce papers. That's going to get clicked on. That's going to be opened up, right? If we send a CV to HR, they're going to open it. Sure. They're going to open it. So they're always going to find a way to do that. So if you're 100% dependent on the user not clicking it, not opening that, and you cannot take that hit, then you're going to have a bad time. So we need a layered defense. So we need to educate the users. Yes, that's one layer. We need spam filters, that's another layer, right? We need antivirus, that's another layer. We need segmented networks, that's another layer. We need intrusion prevention system, that's another layer. We need the backup systems, that's another layer. We need incident response plans, that's another layer. And that's how you can deal with these threats, right? The compromise or one incident happening shouldn't bring down a company, just as it doesn't bring down a castle. I've heard this at CANTO, cybersecurity at the start of projects. Make the requirements and define them at the start. Involve your technical people and verify if it's really done at the end before you go live. So project managers, think about this and take that into account. Test your defenses and test them continuously. If you're not doing pen testing on your systems right now, you're already behind, right? If you are doing pen testing once a year, okay, but you're still running behind. What we should be doing is pen testing continuously, because an environment changes and changes very, very rapidly in the telcos. So what we help customers with is put continuous pen testing. So we're pen testing 24/7, 365 days a year. We map those attacks and how far we can get into the networks, and we advise on that. And whenever it's fixed, we just run the tests again, and then we'll see if it's really fixed. Train your users, not just awareness training, but also advanced cyber training, over business continuity management systems and your incident response plans. What do we do? A user calls, has ransomware. What do we do? Right? We can plan that and train that. This one might be a little bit of, let's say, commercial, but I really mean this. Use a SOC. We run a SOC, but use any SOC. Don't just go at it your own. You're not building your own fire department, right? Because it's very costly, right? And incidents don't happen all of the time. So why have a fire department in-house? There is a fire department you can use together. We should work more together to do this. So have your next-gen firewalls monitored. Monitor your EDR, endpoint detection and response, the next-gen antivirus. It's not just having that firewall, monitoring and doing stuff with the alerts. So, and last but not least, collaborate. As I started the presentation, we should not be victim blaming anymore. And here, CANTO is excellent. We meet new people, we trust, we create relationships. Let's put the cybersecurity people together. Let's exchange information. There's a very good way to do that. It's called an ISAC, it's an Information Sharing and Analysis Center. They use a TLP protocol, traffic light protocol. So I will tell you something with TLP red, that means don't tell anybody else, right? If it's TLP white, you can post it on Facebook, I don't care. But if you have a trusted community, and I believe we have here, we can start thinking about these kind of things and then sharing information and really actionable information. So, hey, we got this phishing campaign, these are the links, these are the emails it came from, these users were affected, and that application opened, and this is the actual fingerprint of the virus. I'll share it with you so you can see if you're not affected as well. So if we share this kind of things amongst each other, we will become more resilient. That was a 10-point plan. It's maybe not so easy to do, but it's definitely doable. If you need help with that, or if you want more information, with the QR link, you can get us on LinkedIn, where we share intel that we are able to share. So whenever you need to urgently patch your Juniper or your Fortinet or whatever, your Microsoft environment, there's something going on, it's because other people, where we see it as it happened, and we put it on our LinkedIn page to warn our followers to, to do that. So that was it. In 15 minutes, we reduced cyber risk across the Caribbean with 90%. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that presentation, Paul. Another round of applause for Paul. We're going to be joined on stage now by Alexander Spoove, who is our CTO from Vitwan, and he is going to introduce a video for us.
Can you hear me? All right, perfect. Well, good afternoon. I guess I'm the only one, the lucky one that's standing between you and lunch. Anything else? So we kind of compensated a little bit. We got a couple of desserts that are actually coming through here, so you can get an early skip on the food. My name is Alexander Spoove. I'm a CTO for Vitwan, and we are an integrator that has been providing a lot of various solutions to CSPs in the Caribbean over the past years. And we continue doing so, so I want to give you a very quick overview of one of the solutions that we're offering right now. I guess all of y'all are familiar with what an ASN is. How many of y'all actually do have an ASN? And how many of y'all are relying on that ASN for business? And what if that business goes down? Okay? So this is where we're trying to enter the conversation into DDoS. And I'm going to have a quick video here that is going to say on how we can actually protect against DDoS.
Protecting network infrastructure from DDoS attacks can be a challenge. DDoS hardware has bandwidth limitation and costs a lot to maintain. And backhauling traffic to special cloud-based scrubbing centers adds troublesome latency. Cloudflare Magic Transit is different. It uses our entire Anycast network, which spans hundreds of global cities, to detect and mitigate attacks at the network edge, close to their source, and route clean traffic over Cloudflare's low latency paths for fast performance. The result is better security and performance for your network infrastructure.
Very quick. So that was very quick. So you probably didn't understand too much out of that. So here's what we're doing, okay? The first thing that we need for DDoS is we need to understand what is going on, okay? And this is where we actually have an environment here. I don't know where the password came from, but that's something else. We have an analytics platform. That is the very first thing that we use in order to detect what is the traffic that is on your network. And what we do is that we collect flows, JFlow, SFlow, XFlow, whatever flows from various devices. Also logs, SNMP, and any kind of other information. We combine that with known information like BGP, geolocations, any threat bots that we know of already. and with any other augmented environmental data like DNS data, added taps, or even SD-WAN information. We put all that information together, run that through a system, and now we have a single pane of visibility of what is actually going on your network. Because we all have these, SolarWinds type PRTG, nice little curves of traffic, but we really don't know what is in those curves most times. So here we can now see what is in these curves. We can also alert on them. So if there's something that is happening, we can raise a flag. And lastly, we can integrate them into third parties. And that's where Cloudflare comes into our play here. But the first thing that we can do with this, the platform that we use here, by the way, is called CANTO. I don't know, some of you are already using CANTO. But what the platform allows us to do is that we can now look at the content of your data, and we can do some troubleshooting on these networks. We can also plan for the capacity. We always have to load balance multiple links. Well, when one link is full, how do I move a class C from one place to the other? I'm going to have an outage window in the middle of the night and you're going to just randomly grab a couple of class Cs and see what happens? No, here we can actually see what is going to be happening. We can see what is happening if we take a certain segment and we put it over to another link. Okay. That obviously allows us to manage the network performance. And it allows us to see what the subscribers are doing. Because how many of you do you really know what your subscribers are doing? Do we care? Yes, we do care. Because all of them are doing content. And content is based on CDNs. And if you can't see which CDN their data is coming from, you don't know which CDN you need to acquire, you don't know where that CDN needs to be placed. With these tools, we can tell you where the data is coming from, where are they watching their movies from, how much Netflix data do you have, how much TikTok, or any other things. There's like stuff that appears on a regular basis. There's a new TikTok, flick, flack, beam, boom. There's something always showing up. You don't know where it's coming from. We can tell you where it's coming from. And if we combine that information with DNS information, we can go even inside the CDN. And by going inside the CDN, I mean that, you guys heard about Akamai? How many of y'all has an Akamai server? How many of y'all knows what that Akamai server is actually serving? I do. I can tell you exactly what that Akamai server is serving. I can tell you exactly what is coming in from all these different CDNs, whether they're on-net or off-net. And lastly, we're going back to DDoS. The quick presentation showed that Cloudflare has a great tool. That great tool is called Magic Transit. Magic Transit allows you to clean network traffic. And it's overall an enterprise solution, an always-on solution. You're not enterprises. You're not always on. You're not always connecting through Cloudflare. So how are we doing it? Well, by combining it with the abilities of CANTO, what we're doing is that we can show you what the network looks under normal circumstances. You have traffic from the internet that goes to your peer router, and the day you are under attack, that attack traffic is reaching your peer router as well. However, we are seeing that attack from CANTO. And now what we are able to do is that we are able to redirect that traffic by forcing the announcement to be at Cloudflare. And now the traffic goes via Cloudflare, gets cleaned, and shows up at your network without clogging it. Okay? Why? Because Cloudflare has about 300 and something sites. They keep increasing. 300 and something, they said 326 this morning, they said 320 yesterday, and it seems to be increasing all the time, of POPs worldwide. So the only real prevention against a DDoS attack is what we call a distributed availability of services attack. Why? Because now your network, or that segment that is under attack, is absolutely everywhere. It gets cleaned wherever it is, and then it gets returned to you. And the biggest advantages of all these solutions here is that there's nothing to install. This is all configured. There's no hardware that gets put into your network. There's nothing to deliver. There's nothing to install, nothing to maintain. And having a piece of hardware that prevents you against a DDoS attack in your network is completely useless. I'm sorry, but in today's world, it's useless. Most of CANTO's members are on islands at the end of relatively small pipes. If you get a multi-100 gigabit attack, your network's dead. Having a device that protects you in country is grotesque. Okay, it's like having a barrier at the end of your driveway and having the entire an entire concert come and play on your lawn. Okay? You should prevent them from getting up the driveway in the first place. So here's how we can prevent that. All right. I was asked to be quick because apparently everybody's hungry. I hope you had a little bit of candy in the meantime. Thank you very much. Have a wonderful day. Come and see us if you need more information.
Thank you very much, Alexander. And as Alexander exits the stage, I think we have a giveaway at this time. Andrea? So if there are any problems with the giveaway, her name is Andrea Lewis. Blame her. Andrea, how are we doing it? You coming up here? So this is the giveaway for, the Wheel of Fortune is spinning. No, that's Jeopardy. Na, 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 na. And it's spinning slowly. Let's see where it lands. What happens if the person isn't here, Andrea? Rochelle is here. And the wheel is spinning. Oh, now it's really spinning. Mr. Stephen Johnson from... Oh, wow, we have a winner. Rachel Lindo Hall has been selected. Is she here? I think we're going to have to do another quick spin. They don't have to be here? Oh, apparently they don't have to be here. So Stephen Johnson, who is the director of the Ministry of Tourism out of the Bahamas, he's just going to give us a few words on what will be happening in the Bahamas.
Are they going to queue up?
The video is being queued up.
Is it being queued up before I...
Yes, you want to.
Okay. Hello, everybody. I just want to say on behalf of the Ministry of Tourism, we look forward to welcoming everybody in the Bahamas next year. We just gave you a sneak preview yesterday of Junkanoo, and you can tell our Prime Minister got involved or whatever, but we're going to wait till you come down to the Bahamas. Now, this trip is actually for the Grand Hyatt at Bahamar in Nassau, right? So think about Bahamar as the landlord, and the three individual tenants are the Grand Hyatt, Rosewood, and SLS, which are all 3 5-star properties at Atlantis. Sorry, at Bahamar. Atlantis on the other side, friendly competition. But it's about 10 minutes, 15 minutes away from the airport. It's about 40 to 50 restaurants. Did you want to play that first or what? Okay, go ahead. Yeah, and then there's if you guys want to buy a Rolex, I'll get y'all a discount on the $28,000 Rolex, whatever. So lots of nice stores in there, boutiques, restaurant. You can jump on a bus from that whole Cable Beach area, and you'll be downtown Nassau for $1.50 in about 15 minutes in the Cable Beach area, right? But I just want to say on behalf of the Honorable I. Chester Cooper, who's the Deputy Prime Minister, the Minister of Tourism, Investment, and Aviation, and also the Director General, I just want to say, we just want to welcome you. They look forward to welcoming you in the Bahamas next year. And we just want to thank you guys. We want everybody to come down and really experience, and also to have some conch salad. Because, in the Bahamas, we say conch salad takes 5 years off your life. But we're not responsible for the twins and the triplets and all the other stuff that comes along with it, right? So want to thank you guys for, look forward to seeing you again, seeing you down next year in the Bahamas. Okay? You can cue up the video. Thank you.
Whoa, the Bahamas, that conch salad, lots will be happening. The actual prize. Okay, I could just put my name on it quickly. So CANTO 2024 is almost at a wrap, but coming up, we have CANTO's AGM in Curacao in January. Woohoo! And then we have the big 40th celebration in the Bahamas in July of next year. So July 2025, make sure that your calendars are already free. So at this time, I'm going to give the last word to the Vice Chairman of CANTO, Dr. Del Rio Newman. Please give him a big round of applause. And also remember that the Sub-Optic Workshop Enhancing Strategic Network is going on in the Palmetto 1 and 2, rooms 1 and 2, and that starts at 2 today. Over to you.
Thank you, Rochelle. Ladies and gentlemen, as we draw the curtains on CANTO 2024 Conference and Trade Exhibition, I stand before you on behalf of the board and the Secretary General with a profound sense of gratitude and accomplishment. This conference has been a testament to our collective commitment to advancing ICT across the Caribbean and beyond. I extend my heartfelt thanks to each and every one of you, our distinguished delegates, ministers, speakers, all too numerous to mention. And to you, our participants, your insights, discussions, and collaborations have not only enriched this gathering, but have set a bold course for the future of our industry. None of this would have been possible without the generous support of our sponsors. I wish to express our deepest appreciation to our headline sponsor, Cable and Wireless Communications, our gold sponsors, Brava and WeSolve, our silver sponsors, Bankai Group and Digicel, our bronze sponsors, Alive, Mavenair, and Solution Box, Polar sponsors, eNet, Lanyard sponsors BlueNap and 6D Technologies. Badges sponsor DataSoar. Bag sponsors Telesaur and Cerillion. Promotional sponsors Skywire and JSC Ingenium. Video sponsors Connex. General sponsors Newfield and Sienna, and also to our special guests, the GSMA, Strand Consulting, and to Mr. Philip Henderson of PITA, that it is better late than never. Your unwavering dedication and belief in this mission of CANTO have been instrumental in making this event a resounding success. During this conference, we have been finding common ground on the fair share issue so that we can move forward. Our fearless leader, Ms. Lisa Agard, is the tip of the spear on this. If you have any ideas or concerns, please forward them to her. In addition, we look forward to PITA continuing collaboration with us here at CANTO. Looking ahead, I'm excited to announce the following upcoming CANTO 2025 events, in the theme being Towards a United Gigabyte Society in the Caribbean. CANTO 2025 will be held at the Renaissance Wind Creek in Curacao Resort from the 26th to the 28th of January 2025. And as you heard Rochelle said, CANTO 40th Anniversary and Trade Exhibition will be held at the Hyatt Baha Mar in the Bahamas from the 13th to the 16th of July 2025. Mark your calendars for these upcoming engaging and insightful experiences as we continue our journey towards a connected future. As we part ways, let us carry forward the spirit of innovation and collaboration that has defined CANTO 2024. Together, we build upon the foundations laid here and propel our industry to new heights. Thank you once again for your participation and contributions. Safe travels, and I eagerly anticipate welcoming you to CANTO 2025. Thank you.